We're back here again. Hey guys, my name is John Cartwright. In my last video, I did a brief summation on the different voices in respect to retaining or removing fluoride from the City of Lynden's potable water drinking system. By request, I'm back to analyze the arguments and evidence of a single voice this time, the mayor's. Like the last video, I will use the Salish Current as my primary video source because there's a lot of details in there. So let's dive in. The first explanation given by the mayor is the classic bandwagon argument, which I spoke on in my previous video. It is defined as the fallacy of arguing that because everyone, the people, or the majority, it must therefore be true and right. In this case, the majority and minority are determined by counting the number of people that lined up and spoke in one of the evening events. Those who are looking for the whole truth and nothing but the truth know that what's really important is not quantity but quality, and thus the strength of an argument and the evidence being provided. You can have 99 people show up, say they want to retain fluoride because they like the taste of it, which I've heard a few people in Lynden say, but that doesn't make it a quality argument for retaining fluoride in light of all the other arguments and evidences presented. Argument number 2 is a full course fallacy meal. This is because it is one of those points where several fallacies are involved and it takes a lot to break down and digest. As the appetizer, we are told that there is a missing link in the evidence pool, and if there was some added piece of evidence to the whole picture, then maybe there'd be enough evidence to decide otherwise. It's fallacious because the standard of what meets adequate information and evidence is subjective, decided by the mayor and him alone. If I asked an additional 999 other people on what constitutes enough evidence and information before making this specific decision, I'd have 1,000 different and contradicting metrics. The entree part of this argument is the identity fallacy, often referred to as identity politics. This is an extraordinarily popular postmodern argument from ethos and a variant of the ad hominem, or attacking the person, in which the validity of one's logic, evidence, experience, or arguments does not depend on its strength, but whether the person presenting the argument is of a particular class. In this explanation, the missing identity, according to the mayor, is the medical doctor, or someone with a disease or a medical condition directly related to fluoride. Any bit of testimony and medical evidence provided on the subject would never be able to answer the unavoidable psychological and philosophical questions being brought forth by those on the remove fluoride side, like the ethics of a single or small group of people having the power to medicate an entire community. These are questions that MDs and all their evidence would simply not be able to answer. This is also a half-truth in the sense that while a medical doctor did not show up, plenty of medical professionals did, just not MDs. And people with medical conditions did show up. And arguments in the physiological health category, as I discussed in my previous video, were argued by plenty of those who were on the remove fluoride side of the aisle. It's just that according to the mayor, there weren't the correct identity, even if they are right about what they had said. Our next menu item is a fallacy known as the false analogy or false comparison. False analogies make the assumption that because two or more things share one thing in common, like two towns sharing a similar population size, then they will be similar in other areas. The mayor highlights that there's this 11% variance between Lynden and Ferndale and a 2% variance between Lynden and Bellingham respectively, making the point that Lynden's over 65 wouldn't be so high if the water was hurting its citizens, right? It would go down. I'm not going to go on a tangent here, but I'd encourage anyone to look into the fundamental attribution error, another bias in making judgments about ourselves and others. In a parallel manner to this error in making judgment, what we see here is the mayor failing to consider that the many environmental variables that would motivate and attribute retirees and individuals over 65 to moving or staying in Lynden over other towns and regions, like low crime, low noise and environmental pollution, favorable weather, with limited extremes, numerous 55 and up communities, including nursing facilities and adult care, and access to plenty of amenities and food, service, gyms, etc. We also need to take a step back for a second and recognize that Lynden is not that special. I mean, it is, but not because of fluoridated water. There are plenty of other places all over the country that mirror being in the highest bracket for best places for people to age, such as Portland, Oregon, or Bellingham, Washington, that don't add fluoride. He does prove his erroneousness by pointing at Bellingham, Washington, which doesn't add fluoride, because if removing it was so medically and financially concerning for citizens, then we should be able to see from our Bellingham neighbors the consequences of that. But we don't. I also need to address the argument of lying with statistics. Lying with statistics includes false data in arguments, but it also includes using data that could be otherwise true to take up space when such data doesn't actually prove the main point of the argument. I'm not going to claim that the mayor's data is objectively false, but there is significant difference between his data and other public data, leading to doubts on the credibility of his data. For example, we find that the Census Bureau states that the true variance between Ferndale and Bellingham or Lynden is closer to 5% than 11%. Moreover, Bellingham and Lynden are essentially the same, with Lynden at 18.5% and Bellingham at 18.3% of its citizens who are over the age of 65. But sharing this data still just clogging up the airspace, and if anything, proves that some non-fluoridated communities are doing just as well as Lynden. For his third explanation, he applied the argument from consequences, that both financial and medical consequences would be too unbearable to allow. But we absolutely don't know that to be true, and there are reasons to suggest otherwise, as I noted just before, like plenty of other places that are not fluoridating their water that are doing great. He lies with stats here again, because showing us the population ratio in respect to the number of dentists doesn't actually prove anything other than maybe suggesting that there's less dental businesses inside of city limits. Something to explore on why that might be, but as a fact in this matter doesn't address the current arguments or evidence that has been brought forth in this particular debate. See red herring and non sequitur for more arguments that distract away from more important and fundamental arguments, points, and evidences being brought forth. Lastly, as I discussed in my last video, one of the most obvious errors in logic comes in his fourth explanation. At the beginning of the argument, he starts with a bandwagon, and as his conclusion argument, he also ends with a bandwagon, but one that is completely opposite than the one at the start. This time around, the bandwagon of people are unmotivated to use fluoride even if it's free or low cost, and he states Lynden residents as a whole will be no different, intrinsically unmotivated or undesired by the thought or act of consuming fluoride. It's a double fallacy sandwich, two bandwagon arguments sandwiched together into a big contradiction that reveals the truth is not being told here. What is it? Does the majority want it, or does the majority absolutely just run away opposing fluoride? One fallacy that's very important to human behavior and change is the argument from inertia. Humans struggle with change. Even if we say as individuals that we want change, we struggle with it many times to execute and to be successful in whatever things we're looking to change in our lives. Organizations and industries are not that different, considering they are made up by humans. The argument from inertia is taking the position that it's necessary to stay on a certain course of action, even after having discovered its error, like taking away individual autonomy, because then it would mean something like having to admit wrongdoing, defeat, or that all the previous effort to take tax dollars was really for nothing and still is, or just generally it's unthinkable and unquestionable to allow this change to occur. So instead of changing, humans just say, stay on the same course, or at least that's the error in human reasoning that keeps them from change. Alright, my fellow awesome neighbors, I do hope that this video has been helpful and informative, and I just thank you for sticking around this whole time. God bless.